Welcome to the Wealth Dialogue. I'm Emily.
And I'm Jack.
Budgeting, the word itself is supposed to feel like financial peace,
Okay.
right? Stability, control.
It is. It's marketed as this clear roadmap to wealth.
But if you're listening to this, you've probably felt the paradox. You follow all the rules, you get the apps, you're tracking the numbers.
Yeah.
And yet the whole thing just feels like this constant draining battle that leaves you with guilt and somehow still feeling broke.
It's a huge disconnect. We have more tools, more software, more advice than we've ever had before. But the common feedback we see is just failure.
Right.
And people tend to internalize that. They think, I just don't have the discipline, or my income isn't high enough for these rules to work.
Exactly. So that's the big question for this deep dive, and we're pulling this from our sources, especially the Wealth Dialogue. What if the problem isn't you? What if the whole philosophy and standard budgeting advice is just incomplete or maybe fundamentally broken?
That's the core of it.
Our mission today is to uncover these 5 critical truths about money that can shift the whole focus away from that painful, rigid restriction and toward genuine financial clarity.
We really need to just dismantle that traditional view. We're diving into the core assumptions that sabotage success for people who are, genuinely trying to get their money under control.
Okay, let's unpack that. This feeling that budgeting just doesn't work. Before we jump into solutions, what is the fundamental lie or the misconception that leads to this feeling of failure?
It all comes down to what the source calls the big lie. Most people have been taught to believe that the whole point of a budget is restriction.
Punishment?
Exactly. Punishment. It's immediately framed as, cut this out, stop buying that, say no to everything you enjoy.
It's like personal austerity measures.
Precisely. And just like a crash diet, it's totally unsustainable. It requires a level of emotional rigidity that no normal person can maintain forever.
So what's the alternative?
The insight that changes everything is that the true purpose of budgeting is clarity, not punishment. You're just creating a map of your resources, not a financial straitjacket.
That distinction is so critical, clarity versus punishment, because if you start from a place of restriction, the failure is basically built into the system from the start.
It is. It ignores what it means to be human.
Right.
These traditional restrictive budgets are built on this fallacy of the perfect month. They assume this clean mathematical sheet.
No surprises.
No surprises, predictable expenses, and crucially, zero emotional input. They're models that just completely disregard reality.
But real life is the absolute opposite of that. Real life has surprise dental bills, it has birthdays, it has bad days where you just need some kind of relief, which, often means spending.
And when real life inevitably shows up, the budget breaks.
Yeah.
And when that happens, the first response is always shame.
Yeah.
Self-blame, which just compounds the financial anxiety the budget was supposed to fix in the first place. What the sources really stress is that the system was unrealistic from the start. You need a system that can survive a bad Tuesday.
I think we've all been there. You overspend in one category and you just feel like, well, I've blown the whole thing, so you just stop.
You throw the whole thing out.
Yeah, you throw the baby out with the bathwater. And this restrictive model, it must put a huge cognitive burden on you, right?
It does. It requires so much mental energy to police every single decision. It leads to burnout. You spend so much time worrying about the $3 for parking that you totally miss the bigger picture.
And those popular rules, like 50, 30, 20.
They often fail for that exact reason. They're too rigid. They assume your needs are exactly 50% no matter what. No matter if you live in New York City or rural Iowa. They just don't have the flexibility to respect reality.
Okay, that gives us a much clearer picture of why the old way is so flawed. So, if the goal is this sustainable clarity, we need a better compass. Let's get into the practical solutions, these 5 truths that put awareness before action.
Right, and these are deceptively simple, but they represent a really profound psychological shift in how we handle our money. It's about building a system you actually want to stick with.
So let's start with the one that sounds totally backward to anyone who's tried old school budgeting, the idea of enjoyment.
That's truth number 1. A budget must intentionally incorporate fun money. And this is not just about, being nice to yourself. It's a critical sustainability mechanism.
Right.
If every single dollar you earn is already spoken for by bills and savings, you feel constantly deprived. And that deprivation is the #1 predictor of budgeting failure. The whole thing will just collapse.
I can hear someone listening right now pushing back saying, okay, but if I build in fun money, how do I stop that from just becoming a runaway train that eats all my savings goals?
That's a great question, and the key is intentionality.
Mm.
Fund money has to be labeled and it has to be capped. It's not just whatever's left over.
Oh.
It's a specific allocated amount. Its only job is to scratch that discretionary itch, guilt-free.
Yeah.
It turns the budget from an oppressor into a partner that gives you permission to spend.
That changes the whole dynamic. If I know I have $50 set aside for whatever I want, I don't feel like I'm breaking a rule when I buy a coffee. It's part of the plan.
Exactly.
And that psychological permission seems really connected to the next truth, which is about accepting that life is, well, inconsistent.
It is. Truth number 2 is embracing flexibility. Your budget has to change month to month. Simple as that.
It seems so obvious when you say it.
Right. But trying to force a rigid, fixed budget onto a flexible life just guarantees it will break. I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
July might have a vacation. October has that big insurance payment. December is all about holiday spending. A set-and-forget-it budget is designed to fail.
We're told to annualize the big expenses, which helps, but we rarely adjust the smaller stuff. The sources say that dynamic adjustment is key. So if I have 3 birthdays in September, I need to inflate my gifts category.
And pull it from somewhere else. Maybe your clothing budget is quiet that month. You just move it over. The goal isn't perfect tracking forever. It's accurately reflecting your life right now. The budget becomes this living document, not some rigid contract you signed in January.
Okay, I get flexibility. Now, let's talk about action. The first impulse for most of us is to start cutting things immediately. But Truth 3 argues against that.
It does. Truth number 3, prioritize tracking over cutting. This is so important. Awareness before action. Before you even think about reducing spending, you have to spend a period of time, say 60 to 90 days, just tracking,
Just watching where the money goes.
just watching, replacing all your assumptions with cold, hard data.
But why is that more important? I mean, when you start, you're motivated. You want to save money right away.
Because if you make arbitrary cuts, they're based on anxiety, not facts. You might aggressively cut your grocery bill, but if the real problem is 3 subscriptions you forgot about and eating out too much, you've just made yourself miserable without actually solving the problem.
So you need to find your baseline reality first.
That's the term. And you know you found it when you can look at last month's data and accurately predict next month's spending within, say, a 5 to 10% margin.
That's the part that's always so shocking. You think you know, but when you see the raw data, it's an education.
It's the most critical first step. And that leads us right into truth number 4, which is about where that money so often disappears.
The invisible drain. Tell us about that.
Truth number 4 is beware the small leaks. We all fixate on the huge expenses, right? The mortgage, the car payment. They look so scary on paper.
They're the big numbers.
They are. But the sources show that it's the small, recurring leaks that do more damage. Because the big expenses are stable. They're predictable. The small leaks are insidious. They just bleed you out slowly over time.
So it's death by 1,000 cuts, not one mortal wound. What are the most common leaks we should be looking for?
It's the forgotten services, the streaming platform you use once a month, the premium app you downloaded for a trial and never canceled, bank fees, and crucially, all those little daily microtransactions.
The $4 coffee here, the $8 delivery fee there.
Exactly. That random, quiet spending happens outside of our conscious planning. And when you learn to control those small things, you build the momentum and the confidence to tackle the big things.
It makes a powerful case for auditing those auto renewals every quarter. They really are silent wealth destroyers. Which brings us to the 5th truth, and this feels like we're coming full circle to the emotional side.
We are. Truth number 5, acknowledge the emotional component. We just have to be honest with ourselves. Budgeting is fundamentally emotional. It is not just math.
It's way more emotional than mathematical.
Far more. Stress, boredom, anxiety. Those things affect your spending way more than any spreadsheet formula ever will.
So if I'm stressed, I use spending to self-soothe. If I'm bored on a Saturday, I start scrolling online stores. We need to just admit that these feelings are real and they impact the numbers.
Absolutely. The sources argue you have to address the emotional trigger if you ever want the math to work out. A huge problem is money shame, where you feel so anxious about debt that you just avoid looking at your numbers at all.
Which just makes the anxiety worse.
It's a vicious cycle. So to counter that, you build structural fences. Like maybe you have a 24-hour cooling off period before you buy anything over $100.
Right.
Or you use cash for your eating out category to make it feel more real.
It sounds like the system's job is to protect you from your own temporary emotional state. If your budget can't handle a bad day, it's not a good budget.
Exactly. It needs to be stress tested. I can actually share a quick story here because I lived through this. Years ago, I read all the books on zero-sum budgeting, and I created what I thought was a perfect system,
Every penny had a job.
down to the penny. Every single dollar was assigned. There was zero slack, zero fun money, just pure mathematical efficiency.
And how did that perfection feel in reality?
It felt like I was holding my breath. Constantly.
Yeah.
For about 2 months, I felt morally superior, but I was mentally exhausted.
Yeah,
And then life happened.
of course.
I had a massive work deadline, 18-hour days. At the same time, my car broke down, a $1,000 repair. Then a relative needed unexpected help for a few days. The stress was just immense.
And the perfect rigid budget. What happened?
It blew up spectacularly. I just needed relief and convenience. So instead of cooking, I ordered expensive delivery for every meal. I impulse bought a new gadget I absolutely did not need just because I felt so deprived.
Wow.
I probably spent $500 over budget in 4 days. When I saw the numbers, the shame was so overwhelming, I just ripped up the spreadsheet. I didn't look at my accounts again for a month.
And in that moment, I'm guessing you blamed yourself, your own lack of discipline.
I did, 100%. I thought, I'm careless, I'm weak with money. But the realization that changed everything for me was understanding the failure wasn't mine. The budget was defective.
It wasn't built for a human.
It was built for a robot who never felt stress. When I rebuilt the whole thing based on these 5 truths, with flexibility, with fun money, with a crap fund for emergencies, the spending stopped being an act of rebellion. It became an act of choice.
That is such a powerful validation of this idea. It really reinforces the core message. If you're struggling, you probably don't need more discipline. You just need a better, more realistic system.
That's the whole synthesis.
Yeah.
The goal shifts from this rigid control to informed understanding. When you get clarity on where your money is actually going and why, the fear starts to go away. You move from making reactive panic decisions to making intentional choices.
This has been incredibly clarifying. So the essential finding here is that a budget's true purpose isn't to punish you for being human. It's about understanding how your life and your money flow together. When you build in flexibility, fun, and that crucial emotional awareness, the system stops being a source of guilt and it starts being a source of real empowerment.
That is the core of sustainable financial management. Money gets easier not when we become perfect robots, but when we stop fighting our own reality and start understanding our own behavior.
Absolutely. So for you, the listener, as you step away from this deep dive, here's a final thought to mull over. Stop focusing on the one time you overspent. Instead, reflect on this. How much has your own emotional state, stress, boredom, anxiety historically impacted and ultimately derailed your past attempts at building a budget? Recognizing that connection is the true first step. We'll catch you next time for another deep dive.